Hello everybody and welcome back to LRN. If you are new around here, please make sure to subscribe to the channel on the bottom right. We are the home of F1 fan news and opinions, so make sure to get involved in the comments below as well. Today, a really exciting episode as we look at the top drivers this season and rank all of the grid from 20th to first position based on the performances so far this year. So let's get straight into it then with number 20 and Nicholas Latifi. So Latifi obviously heavily losing in race and qualifying spec to Albon this season. We know he's been really accident prone and arguably you'd say he's not really cut out for F1. I don't think anyone can really argue with it. Whenever we see there's a virtual safety car or a safety car out on the track in F1, I think most people's initial reaction is, oh God, what's Latifi done now? He has just reached that point in his career. He obviously lost hugely to Russell. He's now lost hugely in terms of performance stakes to Albon. And I think the time has come at the end of the season, as everyone at this stage fully expects, for Latifi to leave and end his career in Formula One and hopefully go on to pastures new and find success in a different racing formula. But it's fair to say that it's not been an outright success for Latifi. Obviously a brilliant guy, but yeah, he's just not cut out for the sport, and I wish him all the best when he moves on to do other things in the future. Up to number 19 then, and I've gone for Lance Stroll. Obviously, you know, I think the jump of quality, there is a jump of quality from Latifi to Stroll. He is a better driver, but I still don't think that he's necessarily cut out for the sport. I think that it is time for him to move on as well. I think he's had plenty of opportunities. You know, he's got 4 of the 20 points for Aston Martin this season. He's incredibly hit and miss. He does have a couple of tracks he excels at. And whenever people talk about Stroll not really being cut out for it, they always bring up one odd race where he's had a brilliant result. And it's like, no, the exception doesn't prove the rule here. You can't use the odd result here and there to say that Stroll is cut out to be an F1. It's been years since we had that sort of look of him as a potential driver in the sport. He hasn't proven it. He hasn't progressed. He hasn't improved. And he's now being easily beaten by a Sebastian Vettel who missed the first couple of races of the season, who is, you know, who's had an additional DNF over Stroll as well. I just think Stroll has had his time in Formula One and it's time for him to go. It won't happen, of course, because we know who owns the Aston Martin team. Lance Stroll will be kept on as a driver, but in my opinion, he's right down there in this season in terms of his performances with Latifi. Obviously, you know, I don't rate him that highly as a driver, but also for him to be so far behind Vettel in terms of points haul, to only have a best result of 10th, and to have raced in more races than Vettel this season in the same machinery, I don't think there's much way you can argue that he's definitely down there. So for me, he's down in 19th. Just ahead of him though, and to be fair, not that far ahead, in number 18 is Daniel Ricciardo. I think most people expect him to be down here near the bottom. Only 19 of the 95 points earned by McLaren this season have been earned by Daniel Ricciardo. We've seen him improve over the last couple of races, and you think about Hungary, and he made some really good overtakes on the Alpines when they were squabbling between themselves, and I think was a really good example of what Ricardo can do, a real snippet. But as we say, those individual moments of showing what you can do don't make up for the fact for a season of underperformance, and it doesn't. Ricardo has been consistently underperforming this year, struggling to get hold of the car. He has improved. Things did get a little bit better over the last few races, but being so far behind Lando Norris, especially when you're such a big name, you're not over the hill, you're not, you know, nearing retirement age, not if you are a top driver. I mean, look at Alonso and what he's doing at the age of, what is he, 41 now. You would expect Ricardo to still be performing at a high level, and he isn't. You know, he's been completely outdone by Lando Norris, and Lando Norris has come out publicly and stated how he has had struggles in the McLaren this season, and he's still way ahead of Ricardo. So really not a great season for Danny Rick. Another driver who I think is ready for pastures new, needs to go and find his next calling, maybe his next formula of sport, of racing, whether that be IndyCar, Formula E, whatever he chooses to do, but probably time for Danny Rick to go and head on to do other things and open up another position. We expect, of course, for Piastri to step into the McLaren next season and for another young driver to get that opportunity. So we'll see how he gets on. At number 17, I have gone for Zhou Guan Yu. Really hard to judge Zhou Guan Yu's season because he's had 5 DNFs this year. Of course, we know what the reliability issues of Ferrari have been. So huge issues there for Guan Yu. But he's been consistently outperformed by his teammate, Valtteri Bottas. And only 5 out of the 51 points for Alfa Romeo this season have come for Zhou Guan Yu. So definitely more to come from him. He's still a young driver, still learning, still deserving of an opportunity to prove himself. And as I say, been very much undone by the fact that the engine in the Ferrari is as unreliable as we've seen it to be throughout the Ferrari customer teams and the Ferrari Works team as well. So definitely more to come from him as a driver. But when you look at the points haul that he's got versus his teammate and the performances this season versus his teammate when he has finished, it's fair to say that it's not been the best season for him, and definitely improvement needed. Next up at number 16, we have Yuki Sonoda. So real hit and miss season for him. I like Sonoda. I think he's a talent in the sport, and hopefully will go on to do good things because he's a great personality. But it's fair to say that he's obviously had a few accidents. His temperament when he's in the car, it does come a bit from his, poor English and how he's learned English through the sport. And I get that, but his temperament can be quite bad. He gets really worked up really easily, and that does impact his driving. We've seen him have accidents shortly after, shouting at the team on the microphone. So definitely more to come from Yuki. And I hope that he can improve. But I think overall it hasn't been that bad. Obviously, he's got a best result of 7th. He's not massively behind Gasly in terms of overall points haul. But of course, it is a poor AlphaTauri car this year. I mean, we've seen that with Gasly as well. It's not the best car this season. So there aren't massive points up for grabs for the team. But I think overall, definitely a lot of improvement needed from Yuki Sonoda. Something to look out for the rest of the season. In at number 15, we have Sergio Perez. So the first big name and way down the order. Now, this may come as a surprise, but I think when doing this list, I really tried to think about it in terms of the drivers, not the machinery. So you need to take into context the fact that Perez has arguably the best car on the grid. And we've seen how well Verstappen has done in that car. And we had glimpses, of course, of Perez. Winning in Monaco was a huge result for Perez. Fantastic for him. But to go from that to being so far behind Verstappen at this stage of the season is really disappointing. I was hoping for more from Perez. I was hoping that he would really take a challenge to Verstappen. I think when you look at the issues that Ferrari have had, we were really reliant on Perez to go and challenge Verstappen for the Drivers' Championship. It just hasn't happened. He's now massively behind on points. And it's only a matter of time before team orders go against him. I think we've already seen it a little bit, but on the whole, I think we're going to see it more and more now in the last 9 races of the season where they're going to favour Verstappen, and Perez is going to be there purely to help Verstappen ensure that he comes home with his 2nd Drivers' Championship. So really disappointing that Perez hasn't been able to put the pressure on to the Red Bull team to drive his races as well and give him an equal opportunity at the Drivers' Championship along with Verstappen. And I only can hope that he'll be able to deliver more in the car next season, because of course we expect him to stay on and see out his contract with Red Bull as the teammate of Max Verstappen. So personally, I'm expecting a lot more from him. I say he's down in 15th purely because I think he's underperformed so much compared to the car that he has. And I think I hope to see more from him in the last 9 races of the season. In at number 14 then, we have Pierre Gasly. So only a couple of positions up from his teammate Sonoda. I don't think it's been the best season for Gasly. I think, yes, it's a poor car, but when you compare it to sort of the heights that we saw from Gasly last season, it's certainly not as good as we would expect from Pierre after how good he's proven to be, especially in the AlphaTauri Toro Rosso setup. Obviously, we saw the struggles that he had at Red Bull, and we know there's teething issues for a lot of drivers in these new cars, but definitely not as good as we expected. But he's still put in decent performances this season, still had a best place finish of 5th and a best qualifying position of 6th in what is a really poor car. So not a terrible season for Gasly, just not quite hitting the heights of previous years, and I still think he's very deserving of a better car outside of the Red Bull outfit so he can go and compete consistently in the future. Personally, he'd be my pick for the Alpine seat, but let's see how that plays out, because I know there's still issues going on with contracts, but I do think that Gasly should definitely be in the running for that seat. But this season, not been the best, so I've got him down in P14. In at number 13, though, we have Mick Schumacher. So, interesting season for Mick. We know he had a poor start to the season, struggled with the car, but he's come back really, really strong over the last few races, and he has looked better in race pace with every out. I think his race pace has been absolutely brilliant in the last few races, really, really showing what he can do. His racecraft has been fantastic, but qualifying performances are what really holds him down here. He really needs to get on top of his qualifying, because if he can do that, he's going to be in a better position to start with in the race, and then we're going to see even more points finishes, even more decent results for him. But the qualifying pace is massively costing him. I think it's 11-2 in favour of Magnussen this season in terms of qualifying. So it's a huge deficit for him to have. But in race pace, he's outperforming Magnussen. So definitely needs to just, get that balance right between qualifying and race. Improve that side of his performances, and I think Schumacher will be flying. Hopefully he gets a better seat than the Haas over the next couple of years. I think, again, it'd be interesting to see how well Schumacher can do in a better car. So let's look out for that over the next few years. But for me, down in 13th, purely because, one, yes, he's been outperformed on points by his teammates, 10 points behind, but that qualifying performance has just really held him back. So interesting to see if he can get that sorted over the next 9 races. In at number 12, we have Sebastian Vettel. Of course, now we know it's his final season in the sport, but for him to have scored 16 of the 20 points for Aston Martin, considering the DNF, considering that he has finished, he competed in 2 less races than Lance Stroll, I think it shows how good he still can be. He's had a best race finish of 6th. And he's just been consistent. He's been performing really consistently in the car. We've had a couple of races where he's had really good racing with Lance Stroll, but overall he's had a much better performance out of the car. He's continued to show why he was such a talent back when he was at Red Bull. Of course, the car is nowhere near the level to what he was driven in the past, but he continues to show what he can do. I think, of course, if we had someone who is currently really at the top of their game, we'd see even better performances. I don't think that Vettel is getting the most out of cars like he would have done in the past, but I think 12th position is a decent season for him, and a decent season for him to retire on. I think he's done himself justice this season, and he can retire with his head held high. In at number 11, we've gone for Kevin Magnussen. So as I said, he's already covered in terms of Schumacher down to 13th. Magnussen's performance this season, he's 10 points ahead of Schumacher in terms of total points. And he's also got a massive improvement over Schumacher in terms of qualifying performances. 11-2 is a massive, a better performance than what we've seen from Mick in the same machinery. We obviously saw the 5th place finish for Magnussen in Bahrain at the first race of the season, which was absolutely brilliant for him. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Mick comes up against Magnussen over the final 9 races. I think K-Mag has come back into the sport, proven why he shouldn't have been kicked out in the first place. Of course, he's a much better driver than we ever saw with Mazepin, who should have never been allowed to drive a car in F1. So to have Magnussen back is fantastic. I hope he can continue in form, get a few more points. I love having him around the sport. I think he's brilliant at the Haas team as well. I think those relationships are great. I love seeing the relationship between him and Günther Steiner. But it's also, he's a fantastic measuring stick for Mick Schumacher because he's a really good driver in the sport. He's not a top driver, but he's certainly nowhere near the bottom. And it's someone that Mick can look to and go, look, if I'm going to prove myself as being deserving of a top drive or even a better drive, I need to be outperforming Magnussen. That needs to be a measuring stick for me to go and prove that I can go to that next level. And I think K-Mag's the perfect person for that. He's put in another decent season, and I've got him mid-table there, 11th place, fully deserving for Kevin Magnussen. Into the top 10 then, and we're going to kick off with Fernando Alonso. So really interesting scene for him. He had his struggles at the beginning of the season, but now back to being one of the most consistent drivers on the grid. We've seen him have multiple points finishes over the last few races. Really consistent, decent performances from him, showing why he's such a fantastic driver and slowly closing that gap to Ocon in terms of total points haul. But you look at his performance in Canada, especially where he got second place in qualifying in the wet conditions. When he has those opportunities to bring out a really amazing performance, Alonso is the guy to do it. He's proven time and time again what a talent he is. And of course, over the course of the season, he's had his struggles, which is why he's behind Ocon in terms of points. And that's why he's down in 10th. Certainly, I think he's higher than that in terms of pure ability. I think we know Alonso is one of the top drivers in F1 and has been for a long time. But this season, when you look at it, it's hard to argue for him to be any higher than that, given that he is behind Ocon on points and he has had those issues. But he's certainly coming back to it, and I certainly think he's going to be higher than 10th overall when we get to the end of the season, if he can continue in the form that he's in. But taking everything into account, we've got Alonso in 10th place as things stand. In number 9, we have Carlos Sainz. So I think it's hard to argue that the Ferrari drivers are going to be sort of lower down here, purely on the basis that they, again, arguably have the fastest car on the grid, and they are struggling. They're struggling hugely, and now, of course, that's not down to the drivers as a whole, because we know what the issues that Ferrari have had in terms of their strategic issues, in terms of the reliability issues. So in no way am I putting that completely on the drivers. But Sainz, you look at his performances and you can say, look, beginning of the season, massively struggling. Obviously, it didn't feel like he was going to even finish a race after the first couple. It was like, what's going on with him? Like, I cannot stop just picturing him flying across the gravel at Melbourne when, it was so upsetting for Sainz, and I think for F1 fans, that Ferrari just weren't able to capitalise on the speed that they had to take the fight to Red Bull from the very beginning. Obviously, after Bahrain, where things went pretty well for them with the DNS for Red Bull, but Sainz especially, he had his issues at the beginning of the season, and that definitely weighs him down in terms of the overall ranking. But we know he's come back to it. Yes, he's still then been hit by strategic issues and by reliability issues. So it's really hard to put him forward as one of the top drivers when he's had those problems all coming at him. But when you look simply at the points gaps between him to Leclerc, it's not too bad, but him to Verstappen is absolutely huge, and he's definitely got a car underneath him that should be competing at the front consistently. I think for a while he had a big pace disadvantage to Leclerc as well. Certainly through the first few races of the season, Leclerc definitely got to grips with the car quicker. So I've got Sainz down in 9th. He's definitely come back to form, shown what he can do, got that race win in Silverstone. So definite improvement from Sainz. But definitely more to come from him. Definitely needs to continue on that form into the rest of the season. And I think if he can do that, he has a really good opportunity to finish ahead of Leclerc overall, not just in terms of this, but in terms of the drivers' standings. I think he's got a fantastic opportunity to finish ahead of Leclerc, allowing for any decisions or any reliability issues that both of them individually may have. It may hit Sainz more than Leclerc, so it may be things like that end up deciding it. But purely in terms of driving ability, I think Sainz has shown that he's really up there now, and driving fantastically well. So hopefully Ferrari give him the car to go and compete over the rest of the season with Leclerc, Perez and Verstappen. And number 8 then, and it's probably as expected, we've got Charles Leclerc. So similar issues, of course, in terms of Ferrari reliability issues, in terms of strategic issues. But I think Leclerc's obviously had his individual mistakes. He's had, he had his spins, crashes. We've got France where he seemingly just binned it. And at the end of the day, they haven't come out and said there was any issue with the car. As far as we know right now, he's just binned it. So he has had his individual errors this season, and that is weighing him down. The fact that he's had arguably the fastest car and he's so far behind Verstappen weighs him down in terms of this this selection, and obviously brings him down to 8th position. He has proven, race to race, that he's arguably the quickest person on his day on the track. He certainly has shown that he can be. He's no question he's a phenomenal talent, but he needs to get that consistency level back. He doesn't have it at the moment. He does struggle for that. He's got those errors in his locker, and if he can get those, put to bed, get his consistently level up, and then retain the speed that makes him such a phenomenal driver on his day, he will be a force to be reckoned with. But I think he's got a ways to go to do that. I think Ferrari have a ways to go to be able to compete for championships. And I think at this stage, it looks like Sainz, over the next year or two, could be the one to actually be the more consistent driver and potentially take that #1 spot if Ferrari were ever to allow it. But Leclerc's the only person that can change that. Just needs to cut those errors out of his racing. But there's no questioning his speed on his day is absolutely phenomenal. So we've got him down in 8th for now, but we'll of course see how the next few races go and see if he can improve on that before the end of the season. In at number 7 then, we have Lewis Hamilton. Obviously, we saw the struggles he had at the beginning of the season. He could not get to grip with the car. And of course, we know that Mercedes themselves, massive issues in terms of their performance, and just the development of the car just seemed to cause massive issues. Of course, we saw the bouncing, we saw the porpoising. So no question that it took him more time to get used to the car than his teammate George Russell. But of late, Hamilton has been absolutely fantastic. We saw his race car, his brilliant racing and overtaking at Silverstone. It felt like he was going to go and get a win, but he's been consistently now on the podium. He's reducing the points gap to his teammate George Russell, and we're back to seeing the Hamilton evolve. Now, of course, he hasn't had the car then to go and get the wins, but in terms of him as a driver, it's definitely been the Hamilton evolved over the last few races. He's been absolutely phenomenal in that car, massively outperforming what they have as a car, in my opinion. I think he's been absolutely fantastic, and I'm hopeful that they're going to get together and they're going to have enough to start. I know they can't compete for championships, but I think by the end of the season they're going to be there or thereabouts in terms of pace consistently, and they're going to be challenging the Red Bulls and the Ferraris legitimately for race wins by the end of the year. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that plays out. But I think Hamilton's massively upped his game, and I expect him by the end of the season to catch George Russell in terms of total points. Next up, though, at number 6, we have Alex Albon. So you may be surprised we've got him so high in this list, but again, this is all about the drivers individually, not about the car that they're driving. And I think Albon has been absolutely fantastic. I think he's massively outperformed the Williams. You look at his performances versus Latifi, and he's absolutely destroyed him at nearly every single track we've been to this year. I know Williams have, of course, only scored 3 points, but they are all of Albon's. He has gone in, everyone looked at how Russell was performing in that Williams last year, and they were going, wow, look at him, he's missed a Saturday, he's absolutely fantastic, and he got him the drive at Mercedes. But Albon has gone in there and done exactly the same thing. He's been absolutely phenomenal in the Williams. He's massively outperformed Latifi. He's clearly the #1 driver. You can't argue with it. I think he's been absolutely fantastic. I don't think anyone could have done any more than what Albon has done in that Williams. And I think that's why he's so high up on this list, because he's there on the basis that he has maximised the results from the car. And that is all you can ask of any driver in Formula 1. You can't expect them to win a machinery that isn't capable of it, but you can ask them to maximise the result of the car that they're in. And I don't think there's any question that Albon has done that. So I've got Albon up there in 6th. I think he's been absolutely fantastic for Williams this year, and he's well deserving of being so high up on this list. Number 5, I've gone for Ocon. I think Ocon has had a really strong season. Of course, he's ahead of Alonso on points, which is a really difficult thing to do. He's been incredibly consistent in the car, and again, I think he's making the most of the machinery that he's been given. The Alpine, of course, is not the best car on the grid, but Ocon has been really consistent. He's got a massive points also. He's got 58 of the points of the total of 99 for Alpine this season. So really good, consistent performance for Ocon this year. A massive reason why they're taking the fight to McLaren so well. Obviously not catching Norris in terms of drivers championship points, but overall for the team, I think he's done a brilliant job taking home decent points on a weekly basis. And I think he's just been really good for the team. I think there is still room to grow for Ocon. I think he's still got something to prove, but he has been really good this season. He's got on top of the car from day one, pretty much. And I really can't argue against him being a really, really strong performer this season. I do think that maybe by the end of the year, Alonso will take over from Ocon in terms of total points. You look at how consistent Alonso's been recently, but up till now, up to this point of the season, I think Ocon's been really, really strong in that Alpine team, and I think he's fully deserving again of being high up on this list given the machinery that he's driving. In at number 4, we've gone for Mr. Consistency himself, George Russell. I think no one can question that Russell has been absolutely fantastic this season. He has been consistently on the podium. He's only had one DNF, and arguably that shouldn't have happened because, of course, it was at Silverstone when he got out the car to go and check on Zhou Guan Yu. So, doing the right thing there. Now, he argues there was nothing wrong with the car, but I'm pretty sure we all know there was. Whether or not he could have actually got back to the pits under his own steam is up for debate. He, of course, tried to argue around the accident and how, he was just trying to do the right thing, but the rules are the rules. So he missed out on that race. So the fact that he is still 12 points ahead of Hamilton, having finished one race less, is fantastic. Potentially cost him in the long run because Hamilton's on such good form. So I do think Hamilton will finish ahead of him, but you can't take away it's Russell's first season in the Mercedes. He's been Mr. Consistent. He's got loads of podiums. He's keeping Mercedes in that discussion. For a long period he was, because he's just that constant points haul. Whenever the Red Bull, the Ferrari were having issues, Russell's been there to capitalize, get those finishes. Yes, there's been some luck along the way where he's ended up in front of Hamilton where he probably shouldn't have in terms of race strategy. It's really worked in his favor, whether that be safety cars, virtual safety cars. It's just worked out for him. But you've got to be there to capitalize. I think he's done a fantastic job this season in the Mercedes, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in the future when they are a title winning team. How will Russell cope? Sorry, title challenging team, and how will Russell cope? How will the relationship between Russell and Hamilton cope when they are competing with each other directly for honours? Because this year they've been competing in terms of the car. Their only competitor has been getting on top of the car. When they're actually competing with each other for when it matters, how will that relationship work? How will the team choose who to push if it's really, really close? Who will those team orders benefit? It's going to be such an interesting watch, and I just hope that we really do get to see Mercedes at the front and that battle between Hamilton and Russell, because I think that could be absolutely brilliant for the sport. But there we go, Russell coming in at number 4. In at number 3 then we have Valtteri Bottas, and again it might be a surprise to people to have Bottas so high up in this order, but I don't think anyone can argue against it. He's got 46 of the 51 points for Alfa Romeo this season. He has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt why Mercedes wanted him in the first place when he came from Williams, why he was such a consistent and valuable asset for Mercedes throughout his tenure at the team. He has gone to Alfa Romeo and just proven that he is a good, solid driver. He gets the most out of the car that he's been given. He doesn't excel. He doesn't, go way beyond the capability of the car like we've seen with a Hamilton, Norris at McLaren, Russell at Williams. We haven't seen that, but what we have seen is that he is absolutely fantastic. He's a massively important driver in F1. He has done absolute wonders for the Alfa Romeo team to make them even relevant this year. Again, 46 of the 51 points for the team this year, especially sort of for the first 10 races. He's absolutely excelled in that car, and he's kept them relevant. So I think it's absolutely brilliant for them. I think he couldn't have done any more. And I'm really happy for him. Without the spotlight of the Mercedes team, the pressure that brings on him, on his shoulders, he's absolutely excelled, and I'm so happy for him that he's done so well at Alfa Romeo. He's saying that it's the happiest he's been in F1. He knows he's not competing for honours, but he likes to talk about the fact that, it's different. Whether instead of just concentrating on that one team who you're competing against, you're talking about one bad decision could drop you several places, or one good decision could gain you several places, and a completely different take on the sport. And he's enjoying that midfield battle, and you can see that from his performances. He's been absolutely fantastic. He's deserving of a place in the top 3 this year because of his level of consistency, because that he hasn't let the situation at Mercedes get him down. He's come into this team way down the order from where he was at Mercedes, and he's absolutely smashing it, and he's loving it, and I'm so happy for him. But you know, at the end of the day, it's not a popularity contest. He's deserving of a place in the top three, and because he's done a fantastic job with the Alfa Romeo team. And I think you see the talent that Mercedes let go. I think he was always the ideal candidate to teammate Lewis Hamilton. Of course, the decisions was made to move him on, and all he's done is prove why he was so good in that Mercedes team. And I'm so happy for him that he gets to enjoy the sport now more so than he was when he was at Mercedes. So fair play to Bottas, but fantastic results, and as I say, well deserving of a place in third in the top three of this list. In at number two though, and I struggled with this one, but we're gone for Lando Norris. So Lando Norris, I think you could argue he could be number one. Again, take the machinery out of it. You look at his performances, you look at how far he is ahead of Daniel Ricciardo this season, the points all that he's had. I don't think anyone can argue that Norris is one of the top, if not the top talent in the sport. He is to McLaren what Verstappen is to Red Bull. He's just so phenomenally quick that you cannot argue that. You know, I think anyone that comes into that team to partner Lando Norris is going to massively struggle, because he's that quick, because the team are going to be forced to build the car around him because he's that quick, and that automatically puts the second driver at a disadvantage, because they're going to be driving a car that is designed to support Lando Norris because he's just that good. And I cannot wait to see him in a title competing car. We discussed it on another video around the fact that if McLaren don't do that for him, he's one of the favourites to replace Hamilton at Mercedes when Hamilton retires, and that would be potentially a phenomenal drive to see Russell and Norris together at a title challenging team. But I hope McLaren instead can prove that they can challenge as well, and Norris stays at McLaren, because then we get 4 teams fighting at the front, which would be absolutely brilliant. But Norris is deserving of a car that fast. He has proven he is just a phenomenal driver, and I cannot wait for him to get a race win in the sport, because he is definitely deserving of it. And I hope that he can then go on to challenge for race wins on a consistent basis, because in terms of pure talent, he's up there with Verstappen, he's up there with Leclerc. Without question, he needs to be given a car to back the talent he has as a driver, and I hope that happens sooner rather than later. But finally then, and I'm sure you all knew who it would be, in at number one, it's Max Verstappen. And I'm not the biggest fan of Max. I'm not. I think over the last few years, it's been difficult to be a fan of him. I think his attitude has been poor. I think the way he's talked to his team, talked to the media, just his ego, it's not been my cup of tea. But there is absolutely no question that this season he has come on leaps and bounds. And considering he won the Drivers' Championship last year, that is scary for other people on the grid, because his temperament is massively improved. Obviously, he's as quick as ever, but he's more patient in the car. As I say, on the radio, he's been more calm. He's obviously had his moments, but overall, he's just been a lot better. He's getting better with the media. He's getting better with dealing with the F1 circus, and his personality's come out a little bit more. I think he is improving hugely in the sport, and the fact that he's already ridiculously quick and he's still getting better, as I say, it's scary stuff for the rest of the grid, because if Red Bull give him the car, he will win. And as I say, we need people like Norris, who are potentially equal in terms of ability to be given similar machinery, to challenge him, because Red Bull will continue to design a car for Verstappen, and if other teams don't provide cars that can compete, no one's got a chance, because he will deliver again and again and again. I think he's proven that. I think to him to still be so young, it's scary what he could go on to achieve this year in the car. This year and in following years, over the next 10 years, how successful could Verstappen be? Can he reach Hamilton levels of success? It's going to be, of course, down to the car, but him as a driver is definitely capable of it. And we'll see how that sort of plays out over the next few years. But to see him still improving, given how good he already is, props to him for putting in all the work. Props to Red Bull for giving him the car. He's been absolutely fantastic this season. He's had a couple of moments. Look at the spin at Hungary, but you look at the drive at Hungary, and I think it just massively shows how good he is, right? To come from far down the grid and then to win not just win, but win comfortably and with making errors during the race. It just shows how quick he is, and that he didn't let it get to him. He just got on with it, finished the race, no dramas. He just saw it out. And as I say, I've never been his biggest fan, but I have to give props to the guy. He is just improving all the time, and I think other teams need to get on it and massively improve if we are going to see anyone truly challenge Max over the next few years for those titles. Of course, we expect that Lewis and Mercedes are going to come back at him, hopefully Russell as well. And I think if McLaren can realize their potential, they're telling us all the right things. They're saying they've got the investment, they're saying they've got the right infrastructure, they're saying they're developing the right technologies, and that they're going to be ready to challenge from the 24-25 season. So we've got 2-3 years where it's going to be really important to see other teams step up and take the fight back to Red Bull now that they seem to be the premier team. We need Ferrari to get on top of their reliability issues, obviously with their engine. Maybe that will help again when the engine regs come in 26, but we don't want to be waiting that long. But Verstappen has proven without a shadow of a doubt that right now he's the #1 driver. So far this season, at least, in F1, we could see a massive capitulation in terms of DNFs and other issues. But for now, Verstappen, I don't think there's any question, he's been the #1 driver this season. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed that list. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Who do you think should be #1? Which ones have I called out that you completely disagree with? I have to say that it was really hard picking for a lot of these. I think there's so many, especially sort of, 5 to 15th, that could have gone anywhere. You could justify any of them being anywhere in that list, depending on your perspective of their season so far and how much detail you want to go into. But I think that you look at that, you look at the most consistent drivers near the top. I think it's a decent. I'm happy with the decisions I've made. But as I say, I wouldn't be surprised if your list looked completely different. It's so hard to judge, and it is a lot of opinion. So I definitely want to hear from you what you think in the comments below. Who are your top 5? Who are your bottom 5? Who do you really disagree with in terms of where I've placed on that list? Or do you agree completely? Do you think I've called it okay? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. I'm more than happy for you to tell me that I've done it wrong, and I want to hear your thoughts on why. But otherwise, guys, I hope you enjoyed watching the video. I hope you have a great day, and we'll be back with more content soon. So please make sure to subscribe on the button on the bottom right hand side. Hit the bell icon to make sure you're notified of all future uploads, and comment on the video below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you have a great day. Goodbye.